Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Build Stuff Show. So I'm your host, Jason Little, and this is a show about helping non-technical or kind of mildly technical people figure out how to build stuff with no code and low code solutions. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but first I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I got involved in development probably the mid-90s or so. One of the first projects that I worked on was while working at the Nortel Networks call center. So that name might either mean nothing to you or it might make you very angry. So on the angry side, if you lost a whole pile of money when their stock crashed, you're probably still pretty angry at that company, even though they haven't been around for quite some time. Anyway, we're in the call center. There was maybe 50 or 60 of us in the one call center. I think there were 3 or 4 globally, and we had these gigantic binders with these 4-inch ring thick binders, 3 or 4 of those or so, and it had a list of all of the routing procedures for all of our calls. So if somebody called in from Raleigh, North Carolina, and they said, "Hey, I can't remember my voicemail password, can you reset it?" We'd go through the binder, we'd find out the right codes, we'd log into our mainframe, and boom, then we would route the call there. That was kind of a painful process to go through, so a friend of mine and we made that whole thing electronic. So we first started building in I think it was Windows NT 3.5, maybe even 3.0, Internet Information Server 2.0, and a language called Cold Fusion. We were using a Microsoft Access database as the back end, and we basically took all that paper-based stuff and put it online so it was easier for us to find and route calls. Now that I think of it, it was actually O'Reilly's Website Pro was our first web stack. So again, if you're not technical, don't worry about what any of that stuff means. Basically, back then, there were very few low-code and no-code things to use. You could make the argument that Microsoft Frontpage 97, which I think was the first version that came out, was something that would help non-technical people build websites. There were still some things you needed to do, and you had to know how to code and build things to be able to use it, but at least it was a step in helping people get stuff built. Those tools evolved over time, and another tool came out down the road called Macromedia Dreamweaver, which I'll talk a little bit about this when I get into kind of debunking this whole no-code thing. You could argue it was the first real extensive no-code development tool because you could build some pretty cool things without having any knowledge of how to actually write code. So the tools matured more over time, and I didn't really stop developing, but I migrated more into product management probably in the early to mid 2000s or so. And over the last number of years, I've been working for a bunch of startups, and a really great way to launch a startup is by using no code and low code tools. So now let's get into a little bit about what do those things mean. First of all, it's unfortunately named. It should really be named not as much or very little syntax. So it doesn't prevent you from having to know anything about code. I mean, you still need to know about customer experience, you need to know about usability, you need to know a little bit about structuring sets of data, you need to know a little bit about how applications work. You don't need to know, obviously, how to write the syntax in any programming language to do stuff. When you get more advanced with no code, you can use things like JavaScript and other languages to create little helper functions and stuff like that. But I would think for the majority of people that are doing simple applications, no code is a viable solution, and depending on which platform you pick, it can actually be quite extensible. Some of the more popular no code and low code tools out there are Bubble, Webflow, Airtable. Those are probably the big 3. Softar.io is another one that is essentially a front end for Airtable that has grown like a weed, and it's actually a really cool tool. I used it to migrate my wife's website probably a couple of years ago, I guess. So I had built her a website for her business in HTML, and whenever it needed to be updated, guess who had to update it? So I decided, well, that sucks. I'm going to replace this thing. So I ended up replacing it with a Softar site, and it took me maybe an hour to do the whole thing, and I launched it, and now she can maintain that herself. Now, it's a very simple site. It's a fitness site. It allows her to add and remove classes and create a schedule. It's got built-in Stripe integrations, so people can buy classes and pay for passes and stuff like that. So it's a pretty simple thing. And I think that's one of the main reasons why anti-no-code people don't like it. They'll look at that and they'll go, oh, it's just a website. It's just a hand-coded website. That's easy to do. Anybody can do that. Any no-code can do that. But if you wanted to do a real site, you couldn't do that with no-code solutions. So, you know, I think of how many people I know in the business world who are just honestly getting ripped off by people who are going to charge them thousands of bucks for a website, which in today's world is absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully this show will point you towards some useful tools, from website builders to data repositories to collecting analytics to simple integrations, and some cool ways that you can automate your business without having to spend a lot of money on the quote-unquote technical stuff. So if you are watching this on YouTube, remember to hit like and subscribe. You'll get notified when new episodes come out. And if you're listening in your favorite podcast listener thingamadoodle, subscribe in that too. You'll get notified, and you can always find more information about any of the tutorials that I'm going to be going through in future episodes, or any of the tool reviews at cleverdude.ca. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.